Mike Cronin from Haley and Aldrich, who is the manager of the project. John and Mike will be walking us through the history and the scope of the project and the proposed plan moving forward. Following the presentation, we'll be happy to answer any questions. The presentation is really straightforward, so if we can get through the presentation first, we'll be happy to answer all questions, any comments that you have, and we'll leave the discussion open. So right now I'd like to introduce John. Thank you.
So I do want to thank everybody that came out tonight. This project has been a long time coming for the authority as far as an iteration. Right? So we've been the governing body of the properties over here for some time now, and through different testing procedures and just doing due diligence, testing, groundwater monitoring, all of those kind of things, just staying in compliance. There was the discovery of the petroleum. So along that line, there's course of actions that you have to take once we found those. So Michael walked through the timelines and such like that, but the different tasks and to analyze each and every location to rule out where the petroleum spread or concentration was and the levels and all that. That's what took the first part of the things, and like everything else, COVID kind of threw a snowball into everybody's plans and those kind of things. And then much of the other kind of things that have been going on coming out of COVID, getting the final regulatory approvals and those kind of things. So Mike Cronin will go through all of that with you. He'll outline the testing that's been done and the procedures that will be done during the remediation. And then hopefully, what you hear will be favorable to you, and that, we can get out there. It's a real short duration of the time that we have to be there, and hopefully what you hear tonight is you'll appreciate, hopefully think favorable, and we'll take any questions like Arthur said at the end. Appreciate it. Just walk through the timeline.
Thank you. I've got my own cheat sheet up here because I can't see anything that's going on anymore. How do we advance slides on this? Is there a remote or just do it manually? Okay. I don't see anything. I'll do it manually. How's that? Sorry for the technical difficulties here. We'll try to get through this all the same. Again, thank you for the introduction, John. I'm Mike Cronin. I'm with Haley and Aldrich. I'm a licensed site professional. It means I've been licensed by the Commonwealth to render what we call opinions on remediation and cleanup, to make an opinion that essentially what we're doing is in accordance with state regulations. I've been with Haley and Aldrich for 24 years, been in this business for 26 years, and I've been a licensed site professional for 12 years, or since 2012. So I hope this presentation answers some of your questions in advance, and of course, happy to answer questions when we finish this up. So I'm not there yet, but that's okay. I'm going to talk about a little bit about the regulatory setting in the background, explain why we're doing this remediation, kind of give an overview of the remediation itself, and then some of the safety considerations or safety items we're taking into consideration for part of the construction. So where are we on this one? Okay. So this is going to be tough to see, but what we're here to talk about today is a release of petroleum, a historic release of petroleum. It appears to be a number 6 fuel oil. The number 6 fuel oil is very thick, heavy, viscous oil. Think molasses almost. And it's not a very volatile compound, meaning it doesn't give off vapors. It's located in New Cypher Street. The limits of the release are shown on this huge picture here of in the red box. That's the limits of the release. And the small blue box is the area that we're going to remediate. And I'll go through that, why we're remediating just that area in a little bit. So on the next page, the location of New Cypher Street and where this petroleum release is happens to coincide with the former Boston junk site that was here. It was a junk mill facility that would recycle transformers, and it was the place where transformer oil was released containing PCBs, and the location at which the MCCA did a very big cleanup in 2017. So it just kind of gives an idea of the industrial history of this area and where it's located in the past. It's next to these railroad operations, the junk facility itself, and that's likely the source of this petroleum. So a little bit about the regulatory setting. This particular remediation is being regulated by both the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. The EPA's regulation falls under what's called the Toxic Substances Control Act, and that's related to the PCB release that was previously cleaned up. There's still residual PCBs in the ground, so whenever we manage those soils, we need to work with EPA and within their framework to be able to do that remediation. So we have notified EPA of this work back in 2022. They understand what we're doing and they have agreed and approved it. We just need to send the closure documentation when we're done. The soil that's out there, the residual PCBs, they are underneath the asphalt cap that surrounds, that is beneath a lot of the south lot in New Cypher Street. It's called the EM1 cap, for exposure mitigation cap. And the other regulatory authority overseeing this, and really the primary regulatory agency for this particular release of petroleum, is the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. They work under the Massachusetts Contingency Plan regulations, and we reported this to them, this release, in 2017. Since that time, we've done several investigations, and we've submitted a remediation plan to Mass DEP in 2023. Though they don't approve these plans, that's where I come in as a licensed site professional. I have a license to render an opinion that we've designed this remediation in accordance with the state regulations. DEP, of course, can review it, audit it, tell us, no, you're not, ask us to do different things. But in this case, we have not heard from Mass DEP on this, so it is considered a presumptive approval. All right, so a little bit about the background about how we found this release. In 2015, Haley and Aldrich did some investigations in the south parking lot in New Cypher Street for the planned expansion of the Phase 2 expansion of the convention center at that time, as well as to remediate PCBs while that construction was going on. During those investigations, we did find some isolated areas of petroleum that warranted more investigation. This site under Cypher Street was one of them. So we went back in 2016 and we did some more testing. And what we found at one sample location was that the concentrations of petroleum compounds in soil were above what's allowed to be left in place under Mass DEP regulations. And what they call this, the upper concentration limit, is what Mass DEP refers to that as. So in 2018, we went back out again to do a little more investigations to find out what's the source of the release, how far does it extend. We kind of did a broad brush on this one. What the 2018 investigation told us was that there was no particular point source. It appears to be related to the historic industrial operations of the area, the junkyard, the railroad facility, and that basically the top, the top 10 feet was clean of petroleum, and we really found the petroleum deeper, indicating it was a historic release. So again, we went back out in 2021. We did some more investigations to really refine the extent and help us evaluate what remedial options we had to get rid of the petroleum that was down there. So in 2022, we evaluated remedial options. So the MCP requires us to take a look at different options. What options do you have to remediate this soil? One of those options that we have to look at, and we did, is what's called a no-action alternative. What if we just left the petroleum in place? And that is, that would not help us achieve site closure. So we did not keep that option. We looked at excavation. Excavation of about a 350 square foot area to remove those concentrations of petroleum that exceed the upper concentration limits, the allowable limits. And the last option we looked at was called an engineered barrier. So that also leaves the contamination in place, but it leaves a barrier over the surface similar to the EM1 cap that's there now. But that doesn't actually, it'll allow you to get to site closure, but it doesn't actually remove the contamination. And it's also a last resort option. If there's a feasible option to remove the contamination, you take that option.
Just explain site closure.
Site closure, meaning what we get is called a permanent solution under Massachusetts contingency plan. It means you've cleaned it up to an acceptable level of risk for the environment, for human health. So because the engineered barrier is a last resort option, we do have a feasible option of excavation. We selected excavation, which is what we're doing at this point. So in 2022, we also we designed and bid the excavation out. It was awarded to McCa Construction. And we had planned on implementing that in 2022, but through talks with Massport and the work that they were doing, we put the remediation off to get us to where we are today so that we could limit disruptions to the community to do it all at once. While New Cypher Street is now closed, we can get out there and do this work so we don't have to do other work which would require closing a portion of New Cypher Street. So why are we remediating? We're remediating to remove those upper concentration limits, the amount that's not allowed to be left in the soil. The testing has told us that groundwater has not been significantly impacted by the release. The groundwater concentrations are below risk thresholds and wouldn't even constitute a reporting condition under Mass DEP's regulations. In 2021, we did an evaluation of the risk compared to 4 different elements that the MCP, the Mass Contingency Plan, requires us to look at, which is human health, public welfare, safety, and the environment. The outcome of that risk told us that we do not exceed the risk levels for human health or for safety. Now we do, however, exceed the risk levels for public welfare and the environment. Now what public welfare means is, does it cause nuisance odors or does it result in a lesser use of the property? Now we don't fail for those reasons. However, along with that public welfare comes the upper concentration limit. That's also a trigger. So it's the upper concentration limit is the reason why we did not pass the risk levels for public welfare. Similar to the environment. The environment includes looking at sensitive receptors such as drinking water sources or fish habitats, and that's all based on a proximity of where the release is to those, but also includes a upper concentration limit requirement. So we did not trigger any of the sensitive receptors. We're not in a drinking water area. We're not close enough to a fish habitat to pose a risk to that. It's really just the upper concentration limit. So again, that's what we're trying to accomplish here today. So I'll just go through a quick overview of what we're doing out there. So the remediation has been designed and will be conducted in accordance with the 2 overseeing regulatory authorities, the EPA and Mass DEP. And essentially we're excavating a 350 square foot area down 15 feet below grade. That's the limits of those upper concentration limit exceedances. The soil will be excavated, placed into trucks, and disposed of at a licensed hazardous waste landfill in Michigan. And then we're going to backfill the excavation with something called flowable fill. Flowable fill is like a concrete, but however it's excavatable. So it's going to be one large concrete block that can be excavated but can't be dug through. By putting the concrete in there, it completes the cap that is going to be removed to be able to get to the soils, and then puts the cap back in place. The duration of this work is 3 weeks. We think on the higher side of probably a 2 to 3 week duration to complete this work. So the next 2 images you have on your slide deck, really, I'm sure they're quite small on that there, but they show the excavation. So what we're looking at is there's a cross-hatch area which shows where the pavement will be saw cut. And within that cross-hatched area is a singular diagonally hatched area, and that's the excavation area. Again, it's small, about 350 square feet or so. This plan also shows some of the erosion control measures that will be put in as required, and a decontamination station or truck wash. It's where we can wash the wheels of the trucks before they leave the site. Then the next image shows a profile view on the bottom of the excavation, just to give you a visual of what it would look like through a slice through it. The 2 red bars on the side are the excavation support system. So McCourt will be installing something called a slide rail system. It's basically it's walls on 4 rails that'll be slid down as the excavation progresses to hold the earth back so they can safely excavate the soil. And then it'll be backfilled with that clean, flowable concrete fill material. And that'll be brought up to surface grade. So now on to the safety measures that we're taking. So as you know, right now the site, all of Cypher Street here is restricted access. There's a fence up there with a scrim on it to keep people out. That's one of the safety measures. But McCourt has also prepared a site-specific health and safety plan. So they've been given the chemical data from the petroleum, from all the samples we've taken, and put together a plan that is protective of both their workers, their health and safety, and also the surrounding populations as well. The soil is going to be excavated and live loaded directly into trucks. There will not be stockpiling of contaminated materials. Those trucks will then go through that wheel wash where they're going to wash off the sides of the truck and the wheels of the truck, just to minimize the chance for any tracking of soil off of Cypher Street and onto the public roadways. And then again, the trucks will exit to the west outside of the Hall Road right out here and be able to get to the highway from the Hall Road. So we will also be on site doing monitoring of the air as the excavation is conducted. So we'll be monitoring for both volatile compounds and for dust. So volatile compounds, think of when you look at gasoline, you see the waves coming off the gasoline, you can smell it. That's it volatilizing into the atmosphere. Number 6 fuel oil isn't really volatile. It's a very thick, heavy liquid. It needs to be heated to even move. So it doesn't really evaporate. We're not anticipating seeing much in the line of volatile organic compounds in the atmosphere, but we're going to monitor it continuously. We've set an action level where if that action level is exceeded, the contractor will need to implement mitigation measures, which can be stopping excavation, placing polyethylene over the excavation to stop the volatilization, or using a foam to cover that so that it does not volatilize as they're doing the work. We'll assess the work continually as we go on. Another thing we'll be measuring for is dust. We'll have 2 dust monitors that continually measure particulates in the air, one upwind and one downwind, so they'll change based on the wind direction during the course of the day. They do monitor continuously, and we've set risk-based action levels for those dusts. So the dust, we've set a risk-based action of 150 micrograms per cubic meter, which probably means nothing to you, but really that's really where you start to see visible dust in the air, is about that limit. And these dust monitors have alerts on them, so they can get a trigger before that occurs, so that we can warn the contractor we're approaching our limits, and we can implement mitigation measures before we hit that level. Mitigation measures being spraying the excavation with water to keep the dust down, stopping and reassessing the work that we're doing. Those are really the safety measures that we're implementing. That's the procedures and kind of the regulatory framework. So at this point, I think we can take some questions if you have questions.
So I'm a little math challenged. So my basic question is, can you go over where the site? I want to try to understand where the work that you're doing is, and in conjunction with the work that McCa is doing now.
So it's on this end of Cypher Street, right? So down this end, not closer to D, so closer to the bypass road. And approximately it's closest to B Street, the end of B Street, and not to C Street. So it's right in that region, just after B. If you were to walk down B Street and look at the bypass road, it'd be just to your right.
Almost right across from the West Service Road.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I'm good with you when you put a street here and a street here.
Yeah. So this is B, right?
Okay.
Right, and then C is way over here, and this is our driveway to the loading dock.
Okay.
So it's just that'd be east of the loading dock entrance.
Maybe and this would be the.
That's the area is the bypass road.
Okay.
And this is our entrance to our driveway.
Zoom in as you need. But of course. or not, but thought I'd try a little Google Earth for you.
No, it's helpful. And so where Massport is doing their work is relation.
Well, my understanding of Massport's work is that it is including all of New Cypher Street here, from D to the Hall Road, from the area where we're talking about.
Right. Their closure is approximately just in that little the railroad sign kind of area. That's where they have their fence structure. So
Yeah.
we're behind that.
Yeah.
Will there be any enforcement on making sure that they take the bypass road right out on the thing? How do you know, like, they don't want to stop and get lunch in Seaport or something like that, like the drivers?
You want to talk to the drivers and what they're doing? I mean, they're going to head right out. They're coming right out of here and taking a right. I have not heard of a driver.
Well, I don't know, like some people like to save time, cut down A Street, that kind of stuff. I'm just wondering who's going to make sure that they stay on track. Like, where is their final destination?
Their final destination is in Worcester.
Okay.
So the soil gets loaded onto.
No, sorry, not to interrupt. The only question I ask is there's multiple ways to get to Worcester from there. So they potentially could, they see a lot of traffic, that kind of stuff. So who will be making sure that they take that road like you said they would?
That's going to be responsible.
Yeah, we'll designate the truck route that they have to exit the site to get to Worcester, so we'll make sure that they follow that designated route. So,
And you guys track that?
yeah, we can keep an eye on
Okay.
make sure that they should just take right to the Hall Road, right to the Mass Pike.
Okay.
Right to Worcester.
Yeah.
On top of what Haley had just mentioned, will there be a CMP or a plan submitted to BTD in that regards?
A construction management plan?
Correct.
Not by Haley and Aldrich, no. We're not responsible for construction management plans, but is the site too small to require that?
Yeah, just not sure. I believe they require.
It's also, I believe it's private property, does that?
Technically, because the road is closed currently, right? There's no traffic management plan that's required, and because it is exiting the site and heading right onto the interstate, there's no impacts to local traffic if the concerns they have.
Right. In that process, you're not required to submit, but it would be informative for the neighborhood. But, it being a private lot has nothing to do whether or not you would be required to submit a CMP or a plan with BTD. But thank you for answering that question.
Did you check?
You had a follow-up, but that's the traffic management plan, and the construction management plan, right? You were saying. Okay.
So in terms of time frame, when are you looking to do this work?
Well, McCord is engaged with us already. They're ready to do it. As he said, the permitting's all completed and such like that. We wanted to come before the community, make sure that the community was aware of what we're planning to do, and go through the process there as far as informational back and forths. And again, whenever we have that final designation that the community is comfortable with the plan and that we can move forward, we're ready to engage. And as we said, the duration now, because of the road closure, is approximately 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks of total construction activities. That gets extended if the road was not closed. Right? Then we have to go back to traffic management plans, all of those kind of things that would be required.
So there's a lot that we have gotten out of the Cypher Street project that Massport is running, including dust monitors here at Daisy Park, at Clarity Park, and at Coney Park. And I'm just curious how much you're coordinating with them, with whether the work that you're doing is going to affect sort of the dust monitoring that they're doing, and how that kind of works out. They also, I don't know if you've checked it out at all, have a website, Cypher Street, and they have approved detours, and so they've done a lot of work with the community, as well as providing a community LSP And so just kind of wanting to understand a little bit more about what you all are doing in regards to the fact that it sounds like these projects are going to go out.
Yes, Sarah, I think a lot of the things you mentioned are great recommendations. That's a lot of what we wanted to hear from the community tonight. Is if you like some of the pieces of the Massport process right now, such as the LSP or things that they've committed to, right? And if you look, the things that you like about what's going on with the Massport project right now, we'd like to align ourselves as closely as we can to that. Obviously, there's no community process that is one meeting. We'll be coming back out to you guys. We want to hear a lot more from your neighbors, other folks from Fort Point, and South Boston, just to hear a little bit more about how you guys would like to see this happen. We know that the timeline is a little tight because we would like to, as we think the community would also would like to get in there while Massport is doing it, so we can take advantage of that window of time. It's early November. If Fort Point has a meeting this month, we're happy to come to you as well. But we will be coming back out. Happy to meet with civic groups at their home meeting, just to talk a little bit more about what you'd like to see as far as precautions.
I think it's been helpful for the community to have an LSP because they have been sitting in and are monitoring things, and then they come back and they explain it to us. We're in like English, no offense. Like when
Sorry, I know there's a lot of acronyms in the words.
But it's just that there is in any industry. But that's been really sort of helpful and comforting to the community to know that someone is in place and sending us weekly updates. Their project obviously is a lot longer than yours, but.
To Mark's point, that was part of this process tonight, to hear those kind of initiatives, and we're not opposed to any of those initiatives. So, however, we need to, as Mark said, engage the community to find out what the actual parameters would be desired. We'll work on that, and then come back and report.
Okay, I'll just give you, just to shed a little more insight that I'm aware of. And I'm not an expert at all, but in terms of what heard is that we're getting a short list of LSPs that Massport provided, and then we interviewed them, and then we selected one. So it was a joint between St. Vincent's and FPA.
So along that line, if you have engaged with an LSP, that you would have a comfort level and such like that, if you'd like us to engage with them, or similar to however Massport and the agreement that you have with them for that LSP, we're perfectly willing to mirror that. So again, if you want us to present a list of LSPs, or if you just want to stay with the one you have, we can.
Okay. I can definitely, I can share who. Well, I only remember the first name, so I'll get the full name. And but then also, we also want to do it within your protocols and as well. But
however the engagement happened to get that one for you, we'll follow.
Representing the community, because there's just going to be such overlap. So it would be faster kind of coming up to speed and also explaining. And a lot of questions that I got about this meeting was, well, isn't this the other project that's going on? And it was difficult because I didn't know quite what the area was that you all were looking at, other than I knew it was going to be nearby, to kind of explain, well, it's Mass Convention, and it's not Massport's project, and that was kind of, and it deals with environmental remediation and a very adjacent area.
So, as Michael,
well, I couldn't tell much more.
As Michael had said, we monitor all around the property, right? Because of the substance that is the industrial area, right? So we have groundwater monitoring all around. It's just by, call it bad luck or good luck, that the location of the high concentration happens to be in the location that it is. We have 44 acres. It could have been anywhere on the property, and we wouldn't be anywhere near Cypher Street. And be talking to you also about that project, and not have to even say the word Cypher Street. It's just regrettably that's where it is. And now that there's a project underway, we were hoping to come out and talk to the community and say, it would be conducive for us to do it because it lessens the time, lessens all of the kind of risk kind of issues that happen if we extend the duration of the construction and add traffic management to it. Like, it's a lot more difficult to manage soils if you got trucks and cars buzzing by you as opposed to when it's closed. So that's really the basis of why we're trying to find out how the community would want this project to happen and the kind of time frame that we have right now available to us. It doesn't say it has to, but that's the time frame.
Could you speak a little bit too, because the community's understanding is that that parking lot also has an impact, sort of. And just curious if there's a plan to remediate that. Our understanding is it's been remediated to the point of continued use of the parking lot.
Yeah. So Michael would be much better to speak to that than I because he was involved with that remediation also. But yeah, that is the truth that there is still contaminants there. But the use of it as a parking lot because it does have regulatory cap and such like that, protective measures, it can be used as a parking lot. There are measures if we were to do beyond that that would have to be to undertake, and he can explain more than I.
Yeah, again, that comes back to the two regulatory authorities. You're absolutely right. Under the EPA, the black parking lot has been remediated for use as a parking lot. When you look at the DEP regulations, it's actually been remediated for use as a parking lot or convention center or whatever commercial use. But that's not the plan. But right now, the EPA has got that. They trump that, so it's just for use as a parking lot at this point. The EPA, in terms of this back parking lot, is only concerned about the PCBs, really. Mass DEP is looking at the PCBs and everything else, too. Oh, I'm sorry.
No problem. To revisit the question Haley Gillen from Senator Collins' office brought up, adding to that, what will be the foremost chain of command as the remediation efforts happen and the trucks actually start moving?
So Dan's company, the McCoy Construction, they're going to be in charge of the site. Haley and Aldridge is there to document the work that's performed, make sure it's performed in accordance with the contract documents. So really, I think the chain of command is going to go with McCourt as the site controller, and Haley and Aldridge and MCCA as the owner.
Now, did I hear correctly that there will be a stop in Worcester before going to Michigan? Or?
Yes, the soil will be transferred to a rail car, where it will then be transferred by rail to Michigan.
And at that point, is there anybody overseeing that effort?
The people at the rail station will be there. There will not be anybody from Haley and Aldrich there. I don't believe McCourt will have anybody there either.
This seems to be the same method that Massport's using.
It's a very common method to manage the
and then to
soils.
Michigan, which has me rethinking I didn't in Michigan. Where this regulations go.
There's only a few places in the country that treat this kind of material. Anything else?
In terms of just next steps, I know that there's a few things happening tonight, and I apologize. I'm sorry there's not a greater turnout for your meeting. But what are you thinking of as next steps?
Well, obviously, the engagement that you just discussed as far as any ideas or requests and such like that, we would take those actions, take them and start to put an action plan together to accommodate those, and then obviously schedule an additional time to come back out and say what we have in place. So again, things such as if you want to provide us the LSP that you want to work with, we'll engage that person, and maybe by the next time we come back out, we can report to you that you have them under contract, and that whomever you designate as the lead or the contact, you've already engaged them. We can report to the community that that's underway, and they're in the process of discussing with Haley and Aldridge any of the methods and the plans and those kind of things.
So Sarah, I know right now our game plan is to come out the first week of December to have another full public meeting at a neutral site where all the butters can come and join us. But in the meantime, if there's a November meeting for any civic associations that we want to come visit in the meantime, we'd be happy to do that as well. The 2-week window to advertise, we're pushing up on Thanksgiving. I think we're looking at the first week of December just because of where we're at right now. But like I said, if there's a meeting in the meantime that you'd like us to come and just debrief with the group or have a more forward discussion about whether you'd like to see the same LSP or interview to get a variety for checks and balances, however you guys want to kind of think that through, we'd be happy to come and do it with you.
Excellent. Well, I think we'll probably have some correspondence in between, so we're not full of you all on so that makes a lot of sense.
Could you touch again briefly on the volume of material being moved and what is your anticipated truck trailer number counts? How many trips and what sort of time frame?
Yeah, so the volume at this point is 350 square feet by 15 feet deep. I think we're talking a couple hundred tons of soil coming out, which is maybe 10 or 15 trucks probably total.
All in all, I mean, it's a sizable amount, but it isn't. I've been on projects moving substantial amounts, and I've actually in email correspondence with you and other members of your team. So again, I know Haley and Aldrich is on top of things, but as Sarah had mentioned, if folks can stay in touch with the LSP working with the project or whatever they're most comfortable with in the neighborhood.
Yeah, staying in touch with their LSP? I'm sorry?
If Sarah was asking questions as to who the LSP was and maybe getting more information or possibly attending meetings, just to stay on top of updates.
I'll be available. I'll be reaching out to everyone, and we can keep the dialogue going, the whole process until we come up with a date for an official meeting from us. And I'll be working with you. And, everything. Yes. What was the last part?
I just said, I think between the two neighborhood associations, we cover the geography of the Smith Fork.
Yeah.
We didn't touch on it, but this is, McCoy's plan runs just normal day operations. There's no night work or any of that. So because again, it's so limited, right? To the point it's less than 20 truckloads of material. So it behooves them the faster. That's why we're saying it's 2 weeks, We're saying 3 weeks just because he's got to set up the wheel wash and all that kind of stuff, and then he's got to take it down.
You don't know what weather conditions.
Yeah, it depends on if we're out there in January. Let's just say because December's coming, right? Christmas, we're probably not outside. So if it's January, like you said, we could lose a couple of days to snow or those kind of conditions. Any other questions?
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for coming out.
Oh, no, thanks for coming. I'm sorry, like you said, you're a captive audience.
Yeah, sorry for the technology.